Good morning, ladies. I'm glad that you could join us today. We always start our class off with prayer, and so at this time I'd like for you to pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we know that you're wise and powerful. We know that you have a plan for us. Sometimes you require us to do things that are difficult and hard, but we know that when things are difficult or hard, you are creating in us heroes of faith, dear Lord. You have asked us to demonstrate our faith in you today, this month, during this crisis, dear Lord. You've worked hard for us in the past, and we ask you to work hard for us now. Dear Lord, we ask you to rid this world of this virus. People around the world are suffering from grief, suffering from sickness, suffering financially, suffering from the burdens of preserving life, dear Lord. And we are asking for relief. You are good, you are merciful, and you are full of power. We have no doubt that you can do it. We are thankful for all that you do for us, for your very many gifts. The greatest gift of all is Jesus, your Son. Thank you for that gift, dear Lord, and providing for us a way to be with you forever. Help us to focus today on our goals. Open your word to us and teach us. There is something great about the avenue of prayer that we have with you, the avenue of prayer that you have provided for us. It helps us to live without fear. It helps us to find peace when it is sometimes very hard to find. Give us a measure of strength and peace today, dear Lord. We ask all these things in your precious Son's name. Amen. Okay, ladies, we are in Matthew 12, and last week we talked about the Pharisees had come to Jesus and they were asking for a second sign. He had already performed a miracle for them, but they came and wanted a second one, and he said, no, I'm not going to give you a second sign. But I will tell you that I will be in the earth for 3 days and 3 nights, just like Jonah was in the belly of the fish. So he's given them a little bit of insight into what's going to happen in the future for him. He then compared them to the Ninevites that Jonah had been to preach to, and says, well, the Ninevites were so far, they're better than you guys are. You know, they had only a prophet who taught them for 3 days, and they repented at his words, and yet I am here showing you miraculous signs, giving you all of these things, and yet you do not believe me. And then he pulled someone else out of history to reinforce that. He mentions the Queen of Sheba, or the Queen of the South, that had come to visit Solomon. She had traveled all this way to hear the wisdom of Solomon. Here the Jews had Jesus' wisdom brought to them, could listen to him every day, and Solomon was far inferior to Jesus. And so basically saying someone greater has greater wisdom than Solomon is standing here before you, and yet you won't listen to me, and you won't believe in me. And he says, you're asking for a sign, and I am God's sign, standing and breathing in front of you. So that brings us to the next part of this chapter in Matthew 12, and I'm going to start reading in verses 43. So if you've got your Bible, turn over there. Verse 43. When an evil spirit comes out of a man, it goes through arid places seeking rest and does not find it. Then it says, I will return to the house that I left. And when it arrives, it finds the house unoccupied, swept clean, and put in order. Then it goes and takes with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they go in and live there. And the final condition of that man is worse than the first. That is how it will be with this wicked generation. So he's telling them a little, I guess this is a little parable about an unclean spirit that for whatever reason is not happy with his accommodations, and he leaves this person, and he's going around looking for an appropriate place that he can abide by. He finally decides, okay, I'm going to return back to my former dwelling. And he gets there and he finds it unoccupied. Now it's clean, it's swept clean and everything, but it's ready for him to occupy. So he invites 7 other spirits to join him there. Now the man that was once occupied by one demon is now occupied by 8 demons. And of course, he is worse off than he was before. So I think basically Jesus is saying the Jews of Jesus' day were allowed to see his glory. They got to benefit from his miracles. They got to listen to his teaching. They got to learn from his example. Yet all of these things did not make them holy. If this generation was unwilling to change after all the blessings that Jesus brought, then they had very little hope. The last state of rejecting God's Son would be worse than the first. The inattention that the Jews gave to Jesus and his words made them worse off than they were before. So there are many applications for this. The only permanent cure for evil action is Christian action. The best way to fight weeds in your garden is to plant good stuff in it. We all know these things. And the easiest way to keep a life from sin is to fill it with healthy action. It isn't enough for you to rid yourself of sin or try to get rid of sin if you don't put anything good back into yourself and reject the good that is available to you in the way of Jesus' Son and the words of the Bible. So let's get to verse 46. We're going to read on. We're about to finish this chapter 12, verse 46. While Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, "Your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you." And he replied, "Well, who is my mother and who are my brothers?" Pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother, my sister, and my mother." Okay. So you find out here that we already knew Jesus had a mother, obviously, but we also find out that he has more family members. And just so you know, I don't know that they believe in him at this time. John 7, verse 5 says that his brothers did not believe in him during this time. So that their faith had not progressed to believing that Jesus was who he said he was yet. Mark 3:21 parallels this account. And what's interesting is it gives a little bit more information about why they show up here. They've heard about all that Jesus is doing, and they're thinking, this guy is crazy. This guy is crazy. And you know how mothers are. If there's something going on with one of your children, you know, what are you going to do about it? Well, I'm going to go and I'm going to fix it. I'm going to try my best to fix it. I'm going to get involved in whatever's going on and try to fix it. That's just what mothers do. So they show up here. Well, also later on in chapter 13, verse 55, you find out who his brothers are. It basically lists their names. 13:55 says that it's James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas. And so they approach Jesus. It is very crowded where they are. They can't get in to see him, so they send someone in to say, "Hey, we're here, and we got to talk to you about your problems, about what's going on with you." And Jesus, is not really wanting a lecture at this time. They are interrupting what he is trying to do, his whole mission. And so he basically looks at the disciples or whoever's close by there and says, "Well, these people, this is my family. This is my true family." And it was a rebuke for his own family for that kind of response to them. And there's a lot of things. There's several things here that you can learn from that teeny tiny little bit of scripture. People that are within hearing distance, his disciples, and maybe even possibly some of the crowd, are considered his spiritual family. Okay? But in order to hear him, you had to be close. I think that gives a little insight even into the next chapter. In order to hear what Jesus has to say, you need to be close to him. There's a lesson there. There's a lesson there. The other thing that is interesting to me is Jesus is telling them that spiritual ties are more important than physical ones. Spiritual things in your life are more important than physical things in your life, including family. A spiritual family is more important than a physical family, is what he's telling them. He's even going to take it one step further. his replies to his disciples, "Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother, sister, and mother." He says that fellowship with him requires doing. It requires action. Those who share an intimate relationship are the ones that not only listen to him, they're close enough to listen, they know him, but then they do something about it. Action is required. So there's three little things there that give us insight. Jesus is sometimes subtle in what he says, but the implications are huge. They're huge. Does his family ever become believers? We believe so. James is, however, believed to be the author of the book of James and a pioneer of the early church. And the book of Jude is also believed to be written by one of Jesus's brothers, because Jude himself describes himself as the brother of James. And so we do believe, we can't say for certain, but we do believe that possibly the book written, James, the book is a brother of Jesus, and Jude is also a brother of Jesus. So that brings us to chapter 13. This chapter is the classic parable of the sower. And so I'm going to read verses 1 through 9 of chapter 13. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into the boat, and he sat in it, while all the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, "A farmer went out to sow his seed, and as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. He who has ears, let him hear." So, parable. First of all, it's extremely crowded. Again, Jesus has an idea. I think I'll just get in this boat. He's constantly in a boat. He gets into the boat, he sits down. That's how he's going to start teaching to the people. And then he begins. Matthew introduces us to the way Jesus taught a lot of times, which was through parables. It's a Greek word. It's called parabole, which means to place something beside another in order to make a comparison of the two. It's an effective teaching tool. It's even an effective teaching tool today. Jesus was known to do this. He used things that people could understand. He talked about farming and seeds. He talked about sheep and shepherds. He talked about vineyards. He talked about trees of the area. He used things that they knew about, yeast and bread, these kind of things. They all knew about these things to help teach them or to show a comparison with something that was going on in their life. And so it was interesting. Parables was one of his favorite ways to teach. It was unique to him. So the sower is going to go out and sow seed. Normally a sower would put something over their shoulder, a satchel or a sack over their shoulder. They would reach into that sack, pull the seed out, and fling it into the air. That is how they planted crops at that time. That would be difficult. Yes, that would be difficult. That's how they did it. And so it's very common in that day for them to do that. Jesus will describe 4 places that this seed fell as the sower of the seed threw the seed out. The first place was the path. The path was well worn by travelers. When I think of this, I think of West Texas, and I think of the turn row. You know, we're in cotton fields or some kind of grain fields, and there's always a turn row, and it's kind of beaten down because that's where the tractor turns around, and a lot of times that's where the pickup truck drives down, up and down through the rows of the fields. But it's well worn, and the seed fell there where it was exposed, totally exposed. And the birds it's going to be easy picking for the birds to come and get it. So that's the first place that it fell. The second place that the seed fell was where there were rocks. I normally would think of rocks in a field that had been gathered up and pushed off to the side to get them out of the way. But the commentator that I used, Lonnie Ritchie, said that he believes that it was more of a shelf of rock or a ledge that was just right under the dirt. The dirt barely covered it, but it was a ledge or a shelf of rock there. And so the seed would go there looking at that soil, and but it couldn't go any. It couldn't develop any kind of a root system. In the Houston area where we live, if not everybody has this, but I know how it is around my house. You go out to the backyard to plant a tree or something, the first thing you encounter is clay, and sometimes it is thick, many inches of clay before you finally get to good soil. If you plant a tree or a flower or a bush without removing that clay first, it will not grow. It cannot develop a root system to grow. And so that's basically what Jesus is saying. He says, look, these rocks, or this ledge of rock that is in the way, there's no way that it can develop a root system to grow. It would be, it wouldn't have the nutrients that it needed to grow there. And so it wouldn't be able to get moisture out of there. And it's going to wither and die as soon as the sun comes up. And Houston sun is hot. As soon as it comes up and it doesn't have the moisture it needs, it's going to die. The third place that seed fell was among thorns. Any good gardener and anybody who has spent time gardening knows that weeds grow faster than your flowers do. And if you don't go out there and manually pick them out of there and get them out of there, they will eventually choke out the good stuff. They will take over everything. It's the same way with certain grasses that grow up into your nice, beautiful green lawn. If you leave it alone and you don't do anything about it, it will keep taking over a little bit more space, keep taking over. It will choke them out. That's just what weeds do. And ultimately, the thorns are going to choke out the seed. Lastly, the last place that the seed finally got to was good soil. The soil has been prepared for the seed. It's void of thorns. It's lacking in this rocky layer. It wasn't along the path. It had exactly what it needed: good, rich, nutrient soil, full of moisture. And what does it do? It begins to produce. And it produces 100 or a 60 or 30% of what it was before. So Jesus then said at the last little part that we read there, I think that was verse 9. Verse 9, he that hath ears, let him hear. And Jesus is telling, this is not just a cute little story that I'm telling you about. I need you to listen to this, meditate on it, think about it. What can you learn from this? He's saying, pay attention. How many times have you said your kid, pay attention, listen to what I'm telling you? That's exactly what Jesus is doing. So let's look at verse 10 and see what the disciples have to say. We're going to start in verse 10 of chapter 13. The disciples came to him and asked, why do you speak to the people in parables? He replied, the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes because you see, and your ears because you hear. For I tell you the truth, many prophets and righteous men long to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. So I think the disciples, there may be a twofold meaning when they ask him about the parables. Why do you speak to the people in parables? Yeah, they want to know, why are you telling the people this little story? And hey, can you tell us what it means? Can you tell us what it means? And Jesus is going to say, yeah, I can tell you what it means because you want to know. You want to know. The other people that were present at that very moment, maybe not so much. Maybe not so much. The knowledge would be withheld from them, not because God would not allow them to know it, but because they refused to look for a deeper meaning and seek after it. I've heard this a lot. When you have an opportunity and you make the most of the opportunity, more opportunities come. If you squander your opportunity, then future ones will be withheld from you also. It's the parable of the talents. If God has given you the ability to do something and you refuse to use that opportunity or ability, it will be taken from you. He will find someone else useful to use. We have to be very mindful of the gifts that we have been given and the opportunities that we have been given, that we do not squander the gift that God has given us. Use that gift, whatever it is. Hone that gift, and see what you can produce from that gift. The disciples would utilize every opportunity to learn. They were searching. They were inquiring minds want to know. Yes, therefore it would be revealed to them. Ask and it will be given. Seek and you will find. Jesus is simply saying there are people out there that are really searching for the truth. They are looking. They want to learn. It will be given to them. And then there are people out there that don't want to learn. They're uninterested. And these little stories have a dual purpose. It's going to be revealed to those that want to know, and it's going to conceal from those that are uninterested and don't really want to know. Then he quotes Isaiah 6 verses 9 and 10. And it's about the children of Israel refused to listen to what Isaiah had to say. They had hard hearts or calloused hearts. In the Greek, calloused heart meant that there was a layer of fat around their heart that you couldn't be penetrated into their hearts. Their hearts were insensitive and unreceptive to Isaiah's words. And basically, the people are the same way. They're insensitive and unreceptive. It is a self-imposed condition of hardness of heart for these people. They simply could not hear him. They were deaf to him. And their eyes were closed. They had spiritual blindness. They couldn't hear him and they couldn't see him. And he contrasts that to his own disciples. You guys are not like that. You want to see, you want to hear, you want to know, therefore you will, and you will understand it. And now Jesus is going to give them the message of the parable. Ironically, it's about those who hear. And it relates to the church today. He will talk about various responses that men will have to the preaching of the gospel. And Jesus also gives the title of this story, the parable of the sower. So starting in verse 18, let's listen to how he's going to give the description of this. Verse 18, listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. This is the seed that's sown along the path. What was sown on rocky places is the man who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since he has no root, he lasts only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, he quickly falls away. What was sown among the thorns is the man who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it, making it unfruitful. But what was sown on good soil is the man who hears the word and understands it. He produces a crop yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Okay. First is the path where the seed has been sown. These people will hear. And in all 4 cases, the people hear it. But just like the path, his heart is hard and unreceptive. He hears it, but he does nothing more than that. And the devil quickly comes and snatches the word away. The second is the rocky path. This person hears, he receives the seed with joy. But he has no root. And as soon as persecution happens, or trials of any kind, that cause him to stumble and fall away. Having no root of faith, no staying power, the trials can overwhelm you and fall away. This is one of the many examples that someone can be saved but can lose their salvation and not remain faithful to the Lord. It also shows that even though someone believes and accepts Jesus doesn't mean that they will have a life that is free of worry or trials or persecution. We all, every one of us, has trials and worries in our life that we deal with. Don't let it affect your faith. If anything, those things should make your faith grow. This is an indication that those things can affect the word that's been sown in your heart. Thirdly, the seed fell among thorny soil. Here again is another person who hears the word and accepts it. Our hearts only have room for one God, however. The other things of this world begin to take precedence over God. Crowd out what's most important, and they compete for your heart. This person is unfruitful, meaning that they fail to act upon their faith, and it is choked out by worldly concerns and worldly pleasures. Lastly, the seed falls upon someone's heart that hears it, understands it, and they produce something. Jesus doesn't say that everyone's going to produce 100%. He said 100%, 60%, 30%. Is he unhappy with the person that produces 30%? No. It's based on ability. He's not unhappy. His only concern is that you produce. That you produce something. So what can you learn from Jesus' description of this parable? Well, the one thing that I've learned is that we must sow. God needs sowers. I cannot look at one person and say, they are not worthy of this seed. Well, that's the path. There's no way. The sower does not discriminate against who he sows the seed to. Everyone should hear. Everyone should. The seed was still sown on the path. He didn't even ask me to be responsible for the seed after I sow it. He doesn't tell me what to do. He didn't ask me to harvest it. God will give the increase. That's not up to me. All I know is that I must sow seed. Am I sowing seed? If we sow the seed, someone will be like the good soil, and some won't. But what I know is that I must sow seed. That is all that I have prepared for today. It seemed like a good stopping point for the day. I want to read one song before we leave. It is in this, again, a very old songbook. It's called Take Time to Be Holy, and I want you to think about the words of this song. Take time to be holy, speak oft with thy Lord. Abide in him always and feed on his word. Make friends of God's children. Help those who are weak, forgetting in nothing his blessings to seek. Take time to be holy. The world rushes on, Spend much time in secret with Jesus alone. Abiding in Jesus, like him thou shalt be. Thy friends in thy conduct his likeness shall see. Take time to be holy. Be calm in thy soul. Each thought and each motive beneath his control. Thus led by his Spirit to fountains of love, thou soon shall be fitted for service above. Ladies, I've enjoyed our time. I hope you'll join me again next week. I love you. I miss you. I long for the days that we can be together again. God bless.